what's up guys? Tempo Kettle here again, and today I'm going to be going over a talent build for Anub. I've gotten a few requests on this, so I thought he'd be a good warrior to cover next. He's in a really good spot right now meta-wise, just because of how strong Cocoon is, how good his engage is, and how tanky he is against spell damage. So I'm going to go over my standard build, but Anub does have a little more flexibility than some other characters, so you are going to see a lot of variation in what you take depending on what comps you're playing against. My default build though on Anub is Nerubian Armor at 1, Underking at 4, Subterranean Shield at 7, Cocoon at 10, Acid Drenched Mandibles 13, Epicenter 16, and then Rewind at 20. Level 1 is pretty much a toss-up between Nerubian Armor and Regen Master. Kind of depends on map and kind of depends on enemy comp. Nerubian Armor gets a lot of value if you're either getting hard engaged on or you're hard engaging on them, which means that it's not going to get procced by random damage before it, which means you get full value out of the spell armor. If they have some sort of poke that's going to hit you easily, like Junkrat grenades, or just long, like consistent spell damage, say like Lunara Poison, you're not going to get a lot of value off this. And in that case, Regen Master can be better, especially on maps where you can rotate and stack globe quests easily, like Dragonshire, Tomb of the Spider Queen, smaller maps where you're moving back and forth between lanes. And the extra flat health has a lot of synergy with his built-in spell armor. Level 4. Level 4 is a tricky one. I tend to go all three of these pretty much split evenly, depending really on what I'm playing against, though you can't really ever go wrong with any of them. I really like Underking's range on E, and that lets you get on really far backline targets like Hanzo, who's really popular right now, or like Li Ming way in the back. In other situations, if it's more of a tricky game for Anub where he's getting bursted down, you can get a lot of value out of Shed Exoskeleton too, because it allows you to use your dig in, pop them up with your Impale, and then use your W to disengage. You can reset with your team, regroup with them, back out with the move speed, and you're not instantly overcommitted if they have too much to lock you down and try to burst you. The last good option here is Bed of Barbs. It's similar to Shed Exoskeleton if you need a little more kiting, but it also kind of gives your team a little more flexibility too, since it leaves the spines on the ground. And that's really good against melee heroes, so if they have like Arthas, Stitches, slow burly tanks with no big mobility, that can get a ton of value, especially on smaller chokes. So I'd try all these talents out if I were you, and just get a hang on which ones you like in which situations, and you can't really go wrong with any of them, so don't worry too much about it, but it's just a good way to get a feel for the hero, just trying out all of them. Level 7, I pretty much go Subterranean Shield all the time. It just has more synergy with his Dampen Magic ability at 1. It lets you hard engage, you get your shield, the dampen will proc, and that extra spell armor makes you take less damage on your shield as well. So that means you get really tanky to spell damage and just in general, because Anub's health pool itself isn't that low, only 4,200 at level 20, compared to other tanks that have 5-6k. But this makes him a lot tankier and lets you actually engage without having to worry too much about your HP. Chitinous Plating can get some value. I'd say this is like a 1 out of 30 maybe games if you're playing against a ton of just slow consistent damage like Lunara, Gul'dan, just like poison damage over time where you can get a lot of value out of getting the extra shields and you're not going to die and get bursted. But most of the time Subterranean is the way to go. Level 10 is basically what makes Anub, how good he is. Cocoon. Just the fact that you can engage, turn the fight into a 4v5, web their healer, make sure they don't have defensives up, web a Lucio that's using Sound Barrier, web an Uther that wants to de-shield, and it just gives Anub his engage potential, and it lets you be really flexible in how you want to play fights. It just has so much versatility, so Cocoon is basically a must pick. The only thing you really want to watch out for is some heroes are really good at breaking the web, like Li Ming is one. Anything with just a ton of little ticks of damage, Tassadar, his auto, and his storm. So in those cases, you have to usually use web on those heroes that can break it easily, but you still get a ton of value in it. It does force the enemy to adapt, and it's just a really, really good spell overall. Locust Swarm is okay, but the little bit of damage over time in an AoE isn't really that good, and you don't get that much tankiness off it. There's a few situations where you can get away with it, but I would just recommend going Cocoon every game. 13, my favorite here is Acid Drenched Mandibles. It just gives you a ton of extra single target once you proc it, and since your E slows a target after you hit them, it's really easy to get this bonus up and to keep it up a lot. And it just allows you to put a ton of pressure onto whatever hero you're engaging on and let your team help you kill them. The other two are okay. Burning Rage if you really need to clear creep or just have a little more wave clear, but that shouldn't really be on you as a tank. And Urticating Spines is okay if you did go Chitinous Plating at 7 for the cooldown. It gets decent synergy, but overall this is just the best single target you can get, and that really makes you an actual threat into the mid and late game. Level 16, hands down the pick is Epicenter. This is just the best by far. Just getting cooldown reduction per target you hit with your E, plus the impact radius getting much bigger, which then has huge synergy with Rewind at 20. It just makes your engage so deadly. You can't really dodge a noob E anymore at this point. It's gonna hit no matter what, and that just makes his engage even stronger than it already was. The other two, Beetlejuiced this is just it's not a good talent. I've never gone this before, and Debilitation looks like it could have some potential, but the extra AoE from Epicenter is just too valuable. And level 20, there's no real choice but Rewind, turning your 2 stuns into suddenly 4 stuns, plus an extra shield from your E and extra shield from your W, huge AoE CC, lockdown, burst damage. Rewind is a ridiculous ability. On a noob, it's one of the best. You can't go wrong with Rewind. It gives you such a ridiculous engage. You can basically just stun someone in place for 3 or 4 seconds, and that combined with Cocoon pretty much makes your engage unstoppable at that point. So always Rewind. The other two are just not worth going. Alright, well, thanks. I hope this gave you some tips on how to build the hero. If you want to see some gameplay in action, check out my stream or check us out in HGC. Thanks again for watching, and just keep rooting on Tempo Storm. Thanks, guys. Bye.